The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony like it did every other day, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded the colonists of Earth sunsets they had only seen in pictures. Maria Chun stood at the front of her classroom, watching 23 small faces look up at her with sleepy eyes and curious smiles. And she felt the same warmth in her heart that she felt every single morning. These children were the future of humanity among the stars, born on a world their grandparents had never imagined, breathing air that human lungs had learned to love only 2 generations ago. "Good morning, everyone," she said. And the children responded in a cheerful chorus that made her smile outside the school windows. The colony of New Haven stretched across the valley like a painting come to life, with white buildings and green parks and families walking to work under a peaceful alien sky. Nobody knew that this would be the last peaceful morning they would ever see. 300 kilometers above the planet, shadows moved between the stars. And those shadows had teeth. The Veluxy Dominion had sent 12 warships to this quiet corner of human space, not for conquest or glory, but for something far simpler and far more cruel. They wanted slaves. Commander Vrex stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the human colony with the same expression. A predator gives to prey that cannot run. And his mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Begin the harvest," he ordered. And his ships descended like hungry insects toward the unsuspecting world below. The first warning came when the sky turned dark at midday, and parents looked up from their work to see massive shapes blocking out the sun. Then the screaming started. The Veluxy soldiers poured from landing craft with weapons that crackled with blue lightning, and they moved through the streets with brutal efficiency, separating the strong from the weak. The useful from the useless. Maria heard the explosions from her classroom and immediately locked the doors, gathering her students in the corner, farthest from the windows, while her hands trembled and her heart pounded in her chest. "Stay quiet," she whispered to the children, some of whom were crying, some of whom were too scared to make any sound at all. "Stay very, very quiet." But the Veluxy had scanners that could detect heartbeats through walls, and 24 small hearts beating fast with fear were impossible to hide. The door exploded inward, and Maria threw herself in front of her students without thinking, without hesitating, without any concern for her own life. She was a teacher, and these were her children, and she would die before she let anything hurt them. The Veluxy soldier looked at her with eyes that held no mercy and no understanding of what she was trying to protect, and he raised his weapon in that final moment. Maria did the only thing she could do. She activated the emergency beacon hidden in her sleeve, a device all teachers carried for exactly this kind of nightmare. And she made sure the camera captured everything, every face of every child, every movement of the Veluxy soldiers, every second of what happened next across the colony. Similar scenes played out in terrible repetition. And when the Veluxy commanders realized that witnesses were recording their crimes, they made a decision that would doom their entire civilization, destroy all the schools. Commander Vrex ordered, his voice cold and practical. "Leave no evidence." The order was carried out with terrible precision. 312 children died that day, some in explosions, some in fires, some in ways that the universe should never have to witness. 87 more were dragged screaming onto Veluxy ships, destined for mining colonies where they would work until their small bodies gave out. Maria Chun died with her arms wrapped around as many children as she could hold. But her final act of defiance lived on the beacon transmitted for 17 minutes before the building collapsed, sending everything it recorded across the quantum link relay network that connected all human worlds. 17 minutes was more than enough time on Earth. In the underground command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Helena Vasquez was reviewing routine reports when her console lit up with an emergency transmission from a colony she had never heard of. She opened the file expecting a minor crisis. Perhaps a natural disaster or a supply shortage. Something that could be solved with a few orders and a cargo ship. What she saw instead burned itself into her memory forever. Children screaming, children running, children dying, and alien soldiers laughing while it happened. The transmission ended with the image of a woman throwing herself over a group of crying students, her face calm and determined even as death approached. Admiral Vasquez sat in silence for a long moment, her hands gripping the edge of her desk so hard that her knuckles turned white around her. Other officers watched the same transmission, and the room filled with a silence so complete that it seemed to swallow all sound. Then someone made a noise that might have been a sob, and the spell was broken. "Admiral," her aide said, his voice shaking. "What do we do?" Vasquez stood slowly, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room stand straighter. "Wake the War Council," she said. "All of them, right now. I do not care what time zone they are in or what they are doing." "And the Galactic Concord?" her aide asked. "Should we notify our allies?" The Admiral turned to look at the frozen image on her screen, the face of Maria Chun in her final moment of courage. "The Concord allowed the Veluxy to exist," she said. "The Concord looked the other way while predators built an empire on slavery and fear. The Concord is not our ally today." She walked toward the door, then stopped and spoke without turning around. "Today, humanity has no allies today. We have only enemies and those who are smart enough to stay out of our way." The door closed behind her, and across human space, encrypted channels began to hum with traffic that had not been seen since the darkest days of the last Earth. War in shipyards that officially did not exist. Lights flickered on for the first time in decades, in research facilities buried beneath dead moons. Scientists received orders they had prayed would never come, and in the hearts of 8 billion humans scattered across the stars, something ancient and terrible began to wake. The Veluxy Dominion had made a mistake that no species had ever made before. They had touched human children, and now they would learn why the galaxy should have been afraid of the creatures from the small blue world called Earth. 2 days passed after the massacre at New Haven, and the galaxy held its breath waiting for humanity to respond. The Galactic Concord, that great alliance of 200 spacefaring species that had kept peace among the stars for 10,000 years, moved quickly to contain what they saw as a minor diplomatic incident. Ambassador Thelvox of the Concord arrived in Earth orbit with a delegation of 12 species, each one chosen for their reputation as peacemakers and mediators. They expected grief and they expected anger, but they also expected humanity to be reasonable. They were wrong about everything. The Veluxy ambassador, a creature named Sketh, who had spent 40 years learning to manipulate younger species, released a statement that the Concord broadcast across all channels. The incident at New Haven was an unfortunate overreaction by local military commanders who exceeded their orders. The statement read, "The Veluxy Dominion offers its sincere condolences and is prepared to discuss appropriate compensation for the affected families." The statement suggested a payment of 50,000 galactic credits per deceased colonist, a sum that the Veluxy considered generous. Earth did not respond. No angry transmissions, no declarations of war, no demands for justice, just silence. The Concord delegation waited in orbit for 3 days, sending message after message to every human government channel they could find. Nobody answered. On the 4th day, Ambassador Thelvox became so frustrated that he broke protocol and attempted to land on Earth without permission. His shuttle was intercepted by 6 human fighters that appeared from nowhere, surrounded his ship, and escorted him back to orbit without a single word being spoken. The message was clear, but the Concord refused to understand it. "They are in shock," Thelvox reported to the Concord Council. The humans are an emotional species, and they need time to process their grief before they can engage in rational discussion. The Valorian ambassador, a being named Kethri, who had spent more time among humans than any other alien in the galaxy, tried to warn his colleagues. "You do not understand," he said, his four eyes blinking with worry. "Human silence is not weakness. Human silence is the moment before the storm, the breath before the scream." Nobody listened to him in the Veluxi Dominion. Supreme Archon Vexenar received intelligence reports that confused his military advisors. Human fleet movements had stopped completely. No ships were leaving Earth's shipyards. No military communications were being detected. No mobilization of any kind was visible to Veluxi. "Sensors, they are paralyzed," one advisor suggested. "The loss of their young has broken their spirit, or they are planning something," another advisor warned. But his voice was uncertain. Supreme Archon Vexenar laughed, a harsh clicking sound that echoed through his throne room. "The mammals are cowards," he declared. "They spread across the stars with trade and diplomacy because they lack the strength for true conquest. They will accept our compensation and return to their peaceful existence because they have no other choice." He was so certain of this that he ordered celebrations throughout the Dominion, feasts to honor the successful raid and the weakness of humanity. Those feasts would be the last happy moments the Veluxi would ever know, far from any watching eyes. In the darkness between stars where no sensors could reach, humanity was preparing. Project Prometheus had been created 50 years ago, in the early days of First Contact, when human leaders realized that the galaxy was not the peaceful federation of their science fiction dreams. The galaxy was a jungle, filled with predators who respected only strength, and so humanity had built strength in secret. Shipyards hidden inside hollowed asteroids worked day and night, producing warships that no other species knew existed. Research stations buried beneath frozen moons developed weapons that broke the laws of physics as the Concord understood them. And deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, devices that could kill stars waited for the order to awaken. Admiral Vasquez stood before the United Earth War Council, her face carved from stone, her voice steady and cold. "The children are still alive," she reported. "Intelligence confirms that 87 survivors were taken to Veluxi mining colonies. Then we negotiate for their return," one council member suggested. "No," Vasquez said. "We do not negotiate with child killers. We do not bargain with monsters. We get our children back. And then we make sure nothing like this ever happens again." She activated a holographic display that showed the 17 star systems of the Veluxi Dominion. "Project Prometheus gives us the capability to end the Veluxi as a military power permanently," she said. "The question before this council is simple. Do we have the will to use it?" The council voted unanimously. Ambassador Kethri finally managed to reach Admiral Vasquez through back channels that only the two of them knew about. "Helena," he pleaded, using her first name as only old friends could, "tell me what humanity is planning. The Concord is worried. I am worried." This silence terrifies everyone. Vasquez looked at her old friend through the communication screen, and for just a moment, her stone mask cracked. "Keep your ships away from Veluxi space," she said. "All of them, starting now." "Why?" Kethri asked. Though he feared, he already knew the answer. "Because what is coming cannot tell the difference between friend and enemy," Vasquez replied. "Because we are about to do something that has never been done before. And I do not want your people caught in the fire." "Helena, please. The Veluxi killed our children, Kethri. They laughed while they did it. And then they offered us money as if our babies had a price." Her voice cracked on the last word. And Kethri saw something in her eyes that made his four hearts beat faster with fear. "There is no price," she whispered. "There is no negotiation. There is no peace. There is only what comes next. The communication ended, and Kethri immediately ordered all Valorian ships to withdraw from Veluxy space. He was one of the few who would survive to tell the story of what happened next in the silence of space. Humanity's secret fleet began to move, and the countdown to extinction started ticking. The Veluxy had 17 star systems and a military force of 2 million soldiers. They thought they were safe. They thought they were powerful. They thought wrong. On the first day of the third week after the New Haven massacre, the Veluxy home system received a message from their colony on Vex. Prime. The message was 3 words long. The sun is dying. At first, the Veluxy High Command thought it was a joke or a malfunction, because suns did not simply die. Suns burned for billions of years before their fuel ran out, but within hours. Similar messages arrived from every Veluxy system, one after another, each one more desperate than the last. Something is happening to our star. The light is changing color. We are getting colder. Help us. Please help us. And then, one by one, all 17 Veluxy systems went silent. The Galactic Concord scrambled to understand what was happening, sending long-range sensor probes toward Veluxy space to gather information. What they found defied everything they knew about physics. The Veluxy suns were aging, not over billions of years, but over hours. Their nuclear fires burning faster and hotter, and then beginning to fade as if some invisible hand was draining them of life. Scientists across the Concord worked desperately to explain the phenomenon, and every explanation they came up with led to the same terrifying conclusion. Someone was killing stars, and there was only one species that had been silent for 3 weeks. Only one species with a reason for revenge. Only one species capable of secrets. This Dark Humanity ambassador, Kethri, received a communication from Earth. The first official contact since the silence began. It was not a declaration of war or a demand for surrender. It was a simple text message that made his blood run cold. The children taken from New Haven. We want them back. You have 72 hours to locate and deliver them to neutral space. After that, we stop being precise. Kethri immediately contacted every species in the Concord, begging them to help find the surviving human children before the deadline expired. You do not understand what we are dealing with, he told the Emergency Council. The humans have technology we never knew existed. They have been hiding their true capabilities since first contact, and now they are using those capabilities to murder entire star systems. Impossible, the Veluxy representative shouted, though his voice trembled with fear. No species can kill a star. This must be a natural phenomenon. 17 stars dying at the same time is not natural. Kethri replied, this is not a phenomenon. This is an execution. The Concord realized that they had only 72 hours to prevent something even worse than what was already happening. Search parties were dispatched to every Veluxy mining colony, every slave processing station, every dark corner of the Dominion where human children might be hidden. They found them on the 47th hour, in a mining facility buried deep inside an asteroid in the outer reaches of Veluxy space. 87 children, aged 4 to 12, working in conditions that would haunt the rescuers for the rest of their lives. Small hands, blistered and bleeding, small bodies thin from hunger, small eyes empty from horrors no child should ever witness. The Valorian rescue team moved quickly, fighting through Veluxy guards who tried to use the children as shields, losing good soldiers to protect innocents they had never met. When the last child was loaded onto the rescue ship, the team leader sent a message to the human fleet waiting at the edge of the system. The lambs are coming home. Admiral Torres received the message on his flagship, surrounded by a fleet that no other species had ever seen. Ships that could bend space around themselves like cloaks, weapons that could tear holes in reality itself and in the cargo holds, devices that were already killing 17 suns. He opened a channel to Earth Command. This is Admiral Torres. The lambs are home. All 87 children are alive and being transported to medical facilities. There was a pause. And then Admiral Vasquez's voice came through, tired but filled with something that might have been relief. Acknowledged. Admiral, our children are safe. Does this mean we stop? Torres asked. Though he already knew the answer, another pause. Longer this time. No, Vasquez said. We promised them 72 hours. And they gave us our children back for that. We will be precise in what comes next, but we do not stop. Torres closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about everything he had seen and everything he was about to do. Understood, he said. Prometheus protocols remain active. May God forgive us for what we have to do. God might forgive us, Vasquez replied. But we will never forgive them. Continue as planned, Admiral. Let the galaxy learn what it means to hurt human children across the Veluxy Dominion. The dying continued suns that had burned for billions of years flickered and faded like candles in the wind planets that had been warm, and green turned cold and dark in billions. Of Veluxy looked up at their dying stars and finally understood. The truth that the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to grasp. Humanity had never been weak humanity, had never been peaceful humanity, had simply been waiting, building, preparing for the day when someone gave them a reason to show their true face, and now that day had come. Written in the dying light of 17 stars and the screams of a species that had made the worst mistake in galactic history, the children of New Haven would be remembered forever, and so would the price the universe paid for their deaths. The galaxy watched in horror as the Veluxy Dominion died, not in the way empires usually fall, with battles and sieges and the clash of great fleets, but in a way that no species had ever witnessed before. Their stars were being murdered, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Week after week, the destruction continued with terrible precision. Human technology was revealed piece by piece, each revelation more terrifying than the last von Neumann probes. Self-replicating machines smaller than dust particles had been seeded in Veluxy systems decades ago, waiting for activation codes that finally came, and now they multiplied by the trillions, diving into the hearts of stars and accelerating fusion reactions until the cores burned themselves out. Relativistic kinetic impactors, launched during humanity's first century of space travel, finally arrived at their targets after traveling at nearly the speed of light, striking Veluxy military installations with the force of nuclear weapons without any warhead at all. And worst of all, nanoswarms designed with human precision floated through Veluxy atmosphere, devouring only Veluxy biological matter while leaving every other species completely untouched. The Veluxy tried to fight back, but their weapons could not touch enemies they could not see. They tried to run, evacuating their dying worlds in desperate refugee fleets. But human hunter-killer drones followed them wherever they went. The drones did not kill civilians. Humanity was careful about that, precise in their cruelty, merciful in ways that somehow made the horror even worse. Instead, the drones targeted only military vessels and government officials, only those who gave orders and those who carried them out. The Veluxy species would survive. Humanity had decided, but their power would be broken forever. Supreme Archon Vexenar, the one who had laughed at human cowardice, watched his empire crumble from his flagship as he fled from system to system, always one step ahead of the hunters. Why? He screamed at his advisors. Why do they not accept our surrender? We have offered everything. We have begged for peace. His advisors had no answer, because there was no answer that made sense to species who had never lost a child. The Galactic Concord convened an emergency session, the largest gathering of species in 10,000 years, to address what many were calling the greatest atrocity in galactic history. Humanity must be stopped, the Kefla representative declared. They are committing genocide against the Veluxi. This cannot be allowed to continue. A motion was raised to censure Earth, to declare humanity a rogue species, to unite the Concord against the monsters from the small blue world. And then the human ambassador spoke. She had been silent since the massacre, sitting in her chair with empty eyes while her species waged a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But now she stood, and the chamber fell silent. 312 children, she said, her voice calm and cold, aged 4 to 12, learning mathematics and science and art, dreaming of futures they would never have. She placed a holographic projector on the table, and suddenly the chamber was filled with faces, small faces, young faces, dead faces. These are the children of New Haven, the ambassador said. These are the sons and daughters who will never come home, who will never grow up, who will never have children of their own. The faces floated above the assembly, each one identified by name and age. Emma Chun wanted to be a doctor. Marcus Williams, age 9, loved building robots. Priya Sharma, age 5, was afraid of the dark. The names went on and on. 312 stories, cut short by Veluxi weapons. You call what we are doing genocide, the ambassador said. You demand that we stop. You threaten us with consequences. She laughed, and the sound made several delegates shiver. The Veluxi species will survive. We are not monsters. We do not kill children. She paused, letting that truth hang in the air. But the Veluxi Dominion, the government that ordered this massacre, the military that carried it out, the commanders who laughed while our babies burned, they are already dead. They simply have not stopped moving yet. This is not justice, the Kefla representative shouted. This is revenge. Yes, the ambassador agreed. It is revenge, and it is a warning, and it is a promise. She looked around the chamber at the 200 species who had built this great civilization among the stars. Let every species here understand what happened today. The Veluxi touched human children, and now the Veluxi Dominion ceases to exist. She began walking toward the exit. Any species that makes the same mistake will meet the same fate. We do not negotiate. We do not forgive. We do not forget. The earth protects its young, and the earth never forgives anyone who harms them. The chamber doors closed behind her, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The motion to censure humanity failed. No species voted for it. In a dying star system at the edge of what had once been Veluxi space, Supreme Archon Vexenar made his last stand. His flagship was surrounded by human vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere. Weapons that he could not understand pointed at his hull. He sent a transmission begging for mercy, offering anything, everything, promising to spend the rest of his life making amends for what he had done. The human response was not words. It was the faces of 312 children, transmitted on loop, filling every screen on his ship. Vexenar stared at those faces, and for the first time, he understood why humanity had done this. Not for territory or resources or power, for love, the terrible, burning, unstoppable love of parents for their children. The transmission ended, and so did the Supreme Archon. His ship went dark, and the last symbol of Veluxi power faded into the void across the galaxy. Species who had once dismissed humanity as young and emotional began to revise their opinions. The humans were not weak. They were not peaceful. They were simply patient, hiding their true nature behind smiles and trade agreements and diplomatic handshakes. And now everyone knew what lay beneath the mask. 1 year after the massacre at New Haven, the galaxy had changed forever. The Veluxi Dominion was gone, erased from history as completely as if it had never existed. Its military destroyed, its government scattered, its power broken beyond any hope of recovery. The Veluxi species survived, just as humanity had promised. But they were no longer conquerors or slavers or threats to anyone. They were refugees. Billions of them scattered across the galaxy on cold worlds that no other species wanted. Watched by human observation drones that would monitor them for the next 1,000 years. Some called this mercy. That humanity had chosen not to commit true genocide. Others called it something far worse. An eternal punishment that would remind the Galaxy every single day of what they had done and what they had lost. The Galactic Concord was transformed by what they had witnessed. Species that once bullied younger races now spoke carefully and politely. Especially the humans, species that once ignored slavery and cruelty now passed strict laws against such practices, and species that once thought themselves safe behind their fleets and their alliances now understood a terrible truth. There was no safety from a species that could kill stars. The phrase, "Earth never forgives," became a proverb. Across 100 worlds, spoken in 1,000 languages, taught to children as a warning about the price of cruelty. Ambassador Kethri of the Valorians requested permission to visit Earth. And after a long silence, his request was granted. He landed in Geneva on a gray morning. The sky heavy with clouds that reminded him of the weight pressing down on the entire galaxy. Admiral Helena Vasquez met him at the landing pad. Older now than when they had last spoken, her hair streaked with gray that had not been there a year ago. "You came," she said, and there was something like surprise in her voice. "I had to understand," Kethri replied. "The galaxy has questions that only you can answer." They walked together through the quiet streets of the old city, past buildings that had stood for centuries, past monuments to wars that humans had fought against each other long before they reached the stars. "Your species confuses us," Kethri admitted. "You build hospitals and schools on every world you settle. You write poetry and paint art and dream of peace. And then you do what you did to the Veluxy." Vasquez did not answer immediately, leading him instead to a transport that carried them up through the atmosphere and across the darkness of space. They arrived at New Haven. Rebuilt now, thriving again, but forever changed, the colony had a new memorial at its center. A garden of white stone where 312 small graves were, arranged in neat rows. At the center stood a statue of Maria Chun, the teacher who had died, shielding her students, her arms outstretched. Her face peaceful. Kethri stood before the statue and read the words carved into its base. She gave everything so that they might live. Let her sacrifice never be forgotten. "This is why," Vasquez said quietly. "This is the answer to your question." Kethri turned to face her, his 4 eyes searching her face for understanding. "We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden ships when the Y said it was impossible," Vasquez continued. "We split the atom and walked on moons and cured diseases that killed millions. We have done things that other species said could never be done." Again and again and again, she knelt beside one of the small graves, touching the cold stone with gentle fingers. "We are capable of anything, Kethri. Creation or destruction without limit. Beauty or horror beyond imagination." She stood and faced him, and he saw in her eyes the same fire that had burned 17 stars. "And there is nothing, nothing in this universe that we love more than our children." Kethri was silent for a long moment, processing her words, trying to fit them into his understanding of the galaxy. "Would you really have destroyed them completely?" he finally asked. "Every last Veluxy, down to the smallest infant." Vasquez did not hesitate. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a death sentence, and we would have kept going. She continued. "Anyone who sheltered them, anyone who aided them, anyone who knew and did nothing. We would have burned a path across this galaxy until there was no one left who would ever dare touch a human child again." Kethri felt his heart beating faster, fear and something like awe mixing in his chest. "Your species terrifies me," he admitted. Vasquez smiled. But there was no warmth in it. Good, she said. That means you are paying attention. They stood together in the memorial garden as the sun set over New Haven, casting long shadows across the graves of children who would never grow old. What happens now? Kethri asked. Now the galaxy knows what we are capable of, Vasquez replied. Now they understand the price of harming our young. Now perhaps there will be peace, true peace, built not on treaties and agreements, but on the simple understanding that some lines should never be crossed. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once seemed so full of wonder and possibility. We did not want this, Kethri. We wanted to be explorers and traders and dreamers. We wanted to make friends among the stars and build a future where all species could thrive together. Her voice hardened. But the galaxy taught us a lesson, and now we have taught one in return. The strong prey on the weak, the cruel destroy the innocent. And the only way to protect what you love is to make everyone afraid of what happens if they try to take it from you on 100 worlds. In 1,000 languages, a new saying spread among the spacefaring species. Be kind to the humans. Be very, very kind, because the universe is vast and cold and full of terrors. But there is nothing more dangerous than a grieving parent with a starship on Earth. In a small apartment in a city that had stood for 3,000 years, a grandmother named Lin Chun read a story to her granddaughter. The little girl was 7 years old, one of the 87 children who had come home from the mining colonies, scarred in ways that might never fully heal, but alive. Alive, alive. Grandmother, the child asked, looking out the window at the night sky, why are the stars so quiet now? Lynn stroked her hair, feeling the warmth of the small body against her own, remembering her daughter Maria, who had died so that other children might live. Because, little one, she said softly, the monsters learned to be afraid of us. The child considered this for a moment, then nodded and closed her eyes. And across the galaxy, in the cold spaces between stars, human ships continued their endless patrol, watching, waiting, protecting, because some promises once made can never be broken, and some lessons once taught can never be forgotten. The Earth never forgives anyone who hurts its children, and now, finally, everyone knew it.